Yes. Good morning, everybody. We are live. It is, what is today? What is the date today? It's the 16th of February?
16th of February, halfway through the month.
Okay, cool. Are we on the right microphone for Pums over there? 1, 2, 3,
1,
4.
2, 3, 4.
Let me
Maybe.
just check.
Can you hear me?
I think so. Yeah, you're right. Okay.
Thumbs up, everybody.
Okay,
in the comments.
good. Yeah, we're
the
still.
cult is here.
As you can see, we're still getting used to the ups and downs and the vagaries of our new building and our new set and everything else. But I'm very, very happy to be live in studio this morning with Phumi, and we are cracking on with lots of good stuff for you and to keep you company and to hopefully inform, entertain, enthrall, and empower you. And this morning's going to be particularly empowering. I'll tell you why. We've got
empowering.
I think so, because we got Greg Mills, who we've been very keen to talk to for a very long time.
Since last year.
You went to see the Brent Hurst Foundation presentation, which is fascinating because they take all the information that they can about the political, social, and economic situation. And then what they do is they compile this report, which is probably one of the best kind of aggregated reports.
It's also about scenarios. What they're doing is what they do.
Scenario planning. Right? Isn't that right?
Kind of. It's about scenarios. It's about where we are as South Africa and where things could go politically.
Right.
And what the various paths mean. So different things and different paths. It was an interesting little lunch. It was really near the end of the year. I think
they gave you lunch as well. That's nice. That's a good reason to go.
I would think that the Brent Hurst Foundation can afford to give us lunch.
You would think. I mean, it is Oppenheimer money, right? That's where it all comes from.
It is Oppenheimer. It was there were interesting people around the table.
Yes.
Former presidents.
Oh, really?
Oh, yes, sir. My favorite, Herman Mashaba, was there.
Phumi.
There were people from the presidency.
Yeah.
It was actually quite an interesting group of people. And then me.
Yeah, I know. You seem to be very important. I mean, you're hanging out with some very important people these days. Right?
I seem to be
important. You seem to. Well, you are important, but I'm glad they finally are taking note of your importance.
That and the fact that I gave Crash quite a lot of things.
Yeah. Look, there's Ryan with your coffee. Isn't that nice?
And Ryan's brought coffee.
Yeah.
Look
Isn't
at this.
great?
That's
right lovely.
Around here, I feel hell of a important.
You are important.
Coffee from Ryan. It's got froth and everything.
It's not quite the Brent Hurst Foundation lunch, but I mean, we'll look after you.
Oh, you will have to do until the real thing comes along.
What do you mean the real thing?
The Brent Hurst Foundation lunch.
No, you're the real thing. All right. So listen, we've got a lot to talk about this morning. There's a lot of headlines to get to, but you watched the Super Bowl halftime show, which is more than I did.
Me and 118 million other people.
Is that a good crowd for the Super Bowl? Because I'm not sure if that's a high rating or a low rating for the Super Bowl. I watched a little clip. In fact, we played a tiny part of it yesterday.
And then got into trouble.
No, why?
Do you not know this about the copyright warnings?
What are the copyright warnings?
You're not allowed to just
Oh, wow. Okay.
play clips like this.
Okay, because we played a clip with the sound off.
No.
And
even
it's
the
still,
images, baby. Even the images.
Okay, because I was wondering, what the hell, YouTube? We took the sound off on purpose.
Yeah, no.
And they still issued us with a copyright warning. Look at you. If we'd just spoken to Phumi, we would have known what was going on. Anyway,
Yes.
I watched this clip, which we played live on the show yesterday. Broke the law, which I didn't know about. And it was amazing to watch. I mean, just visually very spectacular on these moving platforms.
That look like iPhones.
Amazing.
It was absolutely spectacular. Look,
Yeah.
I think Rihanna fans were feeling a little shortchanged, some of them. But I saw lots of comments, right? Lots of commentary, obviously, after a thing like this. The internet
Wakes up.
lights up. So all sorts
Yeah.
of theories, all sorts of, and of course there was a whole day where people were like, is she pregnant? Is she not?
Mm.
Should we be asking? Is it like body shaming? What if she's just gotten fat over there?
Oh, okay.
There was a lot of that.
See, we've got to the point in society where we can't say someone is or isn't fat. We just have to pretend that they might be pregnant.
Well,
Yeah.
look, and
Stupid.
And I read a whole lot of, obviously stuff like this also like creates lots of content for lots of news agencies, kind of like people and their theories and think pieces and all of that, you know, because this is the world we live in now. And one that I read was really particularly fascinating because it was about that. It was about her. Is she pregnant? Is she not pregnant? They did since release a statement.
Mm-hmm.
So she is pregnant again. So all of
this
the
is
Rihanna
whose
fans,
kid? This is ASAP Rocky's kid?
ASAP Rocky's kid.
See,
so,
how do I know that? Aren't you impressed? I'm so in touch with pop culture. I know so much.
I had to find out who might the father be.
Yeah.
I had that one I had to Google.
Yeah, you are. You can ask me about Byzantine Roman emperors and their wives, but guess what? I also know who Rihanna.
Know ASAP Rocky.
I know who Rihanna's banging. Right.
So all the Rihanna fans are, of course, even more disappointed because now, of course, there will not be a Rihanna album coming since she's pregnant. She doesn't, you know, she's not going to make the time for that. But the funniest of all the things I saw, you know, because everybody was wearing those white puffer things, except she was in the red puffer and them kind of running across the field. Somebody tweeted that maybe those white puffer things, all the dancers are supposed to be like ASAP sperm.
Oh, wow. That's some allegory going on there. It'd be a hell of a move on the part of the producers, wouldn't it?
On Rihanna's part, definitely.
Oh my God. Wow. You know, it does amaze me that we're still sort of stuck in, no matter how much we move on from the world of multimedia and mega media and kind of the mainstream, the Super Bowl is still a big deal.
It is a very big deal.
It doesn't matter how much TikTok or Instagram or anything else, they need these events in order to generate noise.
You know, sports
There's still a place for all this stuff, right?
So sports is a huge deal. It's a huge economy.
And a big money spinner.
Huge
Massive.
economy. Everything around sports, whether it is the sportsman on the field or all of the peripheral kind of support structures, from the physiotherapists to the sports psychologists to the coaches and even the greenskeepers, right? So even the people who look after the field. It's a huge economy. It's bigger than South Africa's entire economy. But art is an even bigger economy. That's what I you know, one of the things that
So just explain that, because when people think art is a bigger economy, they immediately go, oh, you mean painting and sculpture and architecture, but you're talking about entertainment as well.
Entertainment. Right? I mean, so when I looked at the numbers and the people who tuned in to watch the sports event, 115 million.
Right.
It's a huge number of people. But people who tuned in just to watch Rihanna's performance was 118 million. So a further 3 million people are not even interested in the sports itself.
Wow.
And they tuned in to watch this. And you know, she never got paid. She didn't get a cent for performing.
Isn't that normal? They don't normally pay.
They don't normally pay the artists. They give them a budget for kind of. So
this is not some glass ceiling thing of just because she's a woman. I mean, Madonna, Shakira, they've all performed. The Beyonce, they also didn't get paid.
They don't get paid. They get a budget for putting together the event, you know, their dancers and all of that stuff. But most of the artists actually add money to their performance.
Well, yeah, they want to blow the lights out.
And so, but what Rihanna did is she actually just turned it into a huge ad for her makeup brand.
Clever. So that's amazing advertising, because you can't buy more expensive TV time than Super Bowl halftime ads. That's the most expensive advertising you get, even now, right?
And it's paid off.
And apparently there was quite a lot of controversy because there was some NGO who were promoting Jesus. One of the ads, which was a minute long, Americans do a minute long ads. We in this country used to 30
but only for
ads.
the Super Bowl. Super Bowl have special ads made for Super Bowl.
American radio ads are 1 minute long, as opposed to ours being 30 seconds.
Wow.
Mostly because the terms and conditions at the end. Following pill has the following side effects, and you should be careful of blah, 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 blah.
And they're so fast, those
Hugely,
terms and conditions.
Because they have to speed them up to make it into the minute. A minute's not enough. But there was this ad for Jesus, essentially. It seems to me like there is, there's a movement in America to kind of popularize and...
Is this the ad with the nuns?
No, this is an ad called He's With Us or something like that they put up. I mean, listen, they're always the best creative minds get together. But this cost like a couple of $100 million, if not $1 billion, that they put in for this ad. And it's caused some controversy because obviously some people think that, you shouldn't be advertising Jesus in the Super Bowl. Some people think, well, that's exactly where you should be advertising him.
Listen here.
Whoever pays can have the time.
You do know that the Catholic Church started the first ad agency, right?
No. The Catholic Church?
Yeah. How do you get people all over the world to buy into this concept? How do you do that?
So the first ad agency?
It was actually called, the Italian, something agent de propaganda or something like that. It was started by a pope. And in fact, it still exists in Rome, and they just changed the name on the building. What are you talking about? The church is the ultimate brand.
Okay.
The cross is the logo.
Right. Right. Absolutely.
And every single one of those churches is like a storefront for them. This is...
That's true. It's a powerful brand. There's still more people converted to that brand than any other.
It's been going for a good 2,000 years.
Okay.
So, of course, they have advertising.
Right. Thought as much.
And they have like traveling salesmen. For a long time, they also like sent out ambassadors all over the world to go and proselytize to people. I mean, it's marketing, baby. It's marketing.
Propaganda says the adhesive called No More Nails. Jesus would have preferred that if it had been invented by then. And parallel parking is pointing out what I was trying to say in a much more clumsy way just now. There's a big Christian revival happening on US campuses. It's likely a reaction to all of the liberal insanity that got out of hand in the last few years. Yeah, so, an equal and opposite reaction is what's taking place.
I'm always fascinated at seeing Jehovah's Witnesses in the suburbs. I didn't know that they existed.
Oh, here in South Africa?
Here in South Africa.
Have they knocked on your door?
Listen, in the Logish, Jehovah's Witnesses are quite a common occurrence. You see them every Sunday, they're walking around. But I've been seeing them in my hood. I've been seeing they congregate just about 2 streets away from me, because when I go walking, they congregate there about 2 streets away. And
the Jehovah's Witnesses.
The Sacred Congregation for the Propagation of the Faith. That's what.
Is that who they are?
No.
Oh, that's the Catholic ad agency.
There you go.
The sacred what?
The Sacred Congregation for Propagation of the Faith.
Okay.
Established in 1622.
Oh, right. Well, we learn something new every day.
But I always wonder about the Jehovah's Witnesses that walk around the suburbs, because it's not so easy in the suburbs. You can't just stand at the gate and go, go. You have to ring the bell. You have to say who you are.
Famous Mama says, girl, they're everywhere. I can't say I've ever had one on my door, because you have to get through the gate, and to get through the gate, you have to have a code, which I have to give you. So you're not going to get to knock on my door. When someone knocks on my door, it must be family, or it's one of my neighbors. There's no one else. You can't come off the street and just knock on the door, which I love.
This, I must say, this is also what I love about living in the burbs.
Yeah.
People, nobody's walking past. Nobody's walking past your house. My parents live on the main road from the bus stop.
I've been to their house.
So when
you
you're
forget.
outside.
Remember, we went there for breakfast one morning. Yeah.
So
and everybody's in and out.
So when you're outside at my parents' house in the garden or whatever, people are walking past and you've got to greet everybody.
Yeah.
And
it's hard work.
It's a lot of.
All right. Well, we got a lot of things in the news that we want to get to this morning, and some of them are pertinent for the discussion we'll have later on the Burning Platform. But AKA is to be remembered, a public memorial service, which is going to take place tomorrow, I believe. He was tragically killed Friday evening last week in Durban outside Wish restaurant. His family's confirmed, obviously, that all of this will take place. The father is going to address people further in the course of the next few days about what's happening there, the investigation, everything else. In a statement to the media, family announced that the celebrated rapper's memorial service will be open to the public and streamed online. It is our wish to celebrate the life of Kenan with those he touched and impacted through his gift of music. His memorial will therefore be open to the public as well as be streamed online. They announced that AKA will be laid to rest in a private provincial funeral on Saturday, the 18th of February, so the day after. It's interesting, though, that they're going to give tickets away, but there's a limited number of them, right? So
how do you get a ticket? Do we know?
I wouldn't know that.
What is tomorrow? Is tomorrow Friday? So
tomorrow's Friday.
Is it in the afternoon, in the evening?
It says here 1500 Sandton Convention Center. Limited tickets will be available on. Oh, here we go. Limited tickets on web tickets. The memorial will also be live streamed on the AKA Worldwide YouTube page.
Wow.
What's the bet that's going to break some numbers in terms of record?
I don't know.
People will. I think they'll watch.
Do you think so?
Yeah, I think they'll watch. Then obviously they also spoke about some of the other people involved here. He wasn't just loved by us as a family, but by the nation, as we've seen from loved ones, friends, industry colleagues, media tributes, and the Megacy. The family also thanked their extended family, the Mohosanas.
Oh, here, Terrence says it was sold out. Sold out
within
so it's already 2 hours.
Oh, okay. So, Phumi, you're not going to be able to get your tickets.
Oh,
sorry.
I'm shattered.
All right. Well, no, not that you would go. See, I always find it weird, and you watch the politicians line up for this one too, which I always think is so distasteful.
Hey, so what I did see on was it on social media, lots of videos of people coming to his house. I don't know if it is his house or his parents' house. Kind of, you know, when people pass away, the experience in, and I don't know, I know in Jewish communities it's also like this. It's Shiva after the funeral.
People come and pay their respect.
And pay their respect, and
they console the family.
And you know, sing and pray, all of that kind of stuff. And it goes on for the whole week leading up to the funeral. So I saw a lot of that.
Of course, the Jewish and Muslim funerals happen the next day. So there's no waiting on that stuff.
Yes, but
they do that afterwards.
They do that afterwards. Right. I don't know if the Muslim families also do that, but I know that the Jewish families do, where the family sits and people come and console them and all of that kind of stuff. And as you know, a dear friend of mine had quite a number of bereavements in his family last week. So I also got to see some of that. We went to a memorial service as well. And I sat there and I wondered if these rituals will continue with us, with people my age and younger, because we don't have the same levels of, I mean, people come and they sing and they pray and they, and you know, I have some of my friends who are prayer warriors, so I know they'll come and pray. But I have a whole lot more who are not, who don't know the church songs, who don't know the protocols, who don't know how to behave. And I'm wondering if, like, when the time comes, and I hope it's a long time from now, if Kanejo is going to be expected to host a whole lot of people coming in and out. But also watching the politicians.
Oh, yeah.
Walking in and out at Kenan's family. I also wondered, what are they doing when they get there?
On your first question about whether or not people will carry on these rituals, I think it depends from family to family and how connected to the tradition people are. But there's also a huge amount of guilt, especially, I think, just judging from my Black friends who are, they feel a bit disconnected from their roots in some ways, especially if they live, in Joburg, and let's say they come from a traditional Zulu family in the KZN, sort of, the rural areas or whatever, and they don't even sound like their parents. And they feel a lot of guilt over this for some reason, which is not too difficult to divine. You can see that some people feel like they're leaving their culture behind, and that gives them a massive guilt complex. Because these things are not just cultural practices. They're also coping mechanisms.
They are.
And they're steam releases, right? They're a way for people to deal with difficulty, to deal with bereavement, to deal with loss, grieving, all of these things. They're ways for people. If you do the rituals, you feel better.
And it is also about reconnecting, right? It's about everybody else that's left behind, finding each other and kind of finding a way to move on.
And it's something to do, because the very worst thing you can do is sit all wrapped up in your feelings the whole time. And what these rituals do is they take people, psychologically, we know that the effect of them is to take people out of their misery and their wallowing, which is all necessary. You've got lots of time. You've got your whole life to think about the people who've gone. But this gives you, in that immediate aftermath of their passing, gives you something to do with your hands, with your voice, with your eyes, with your ears. It distracts you just a little bit to keep you in the lane.
I think it also has a little bit of a catharsis, right? Because one of the things that is also part of the ritual, as it were, is also just the retelling. So when somebody was sick, for instance, you get to tell the people who come, they were not well. This is what happened. This is how long. This is when we last saw them. It kind of it does all of that. And I suppose in the past couple of weeks, also remember 2 weeks ago, there was that, I don't know what it was. I think it was like a Mapiano DJ or tavern owner in your neck of the woods, in Mum's, R5.
Yes.
And there were crazy scenes, like all the stuff that I saw on social media of all the people twerking on his coffin. That also made me think, where...
The other problem is that everybody thinks their way of grieving is the best way, right? They're like, oh, well, we prefer to keep things dignified or solemn or whatever. And then there are people who like to have a bit of a noise and a party and the Irish famously have these wakes where everybody just gets super drunk when they say goodbye to someone.
Yeah.
And who's to say that's better or worse than a solemn church service and no tears? And a funeral in South Africa is a very big deal, right across the board. And for some people, it's their biggest party, even if they're not present. I mean, they're present bodily, but they're not present in terms of, being aware and awake. But for some people, it is their biggest party, which is kind of sad in a way to me. It's always made no sense that so many people, the greatest celebration of their life will happen after they're gone instead of while they're there, which is why I think, if you're going to do an epitaph for someone, you're going to tell them how much they mean to you, do it while they're alive. Why do it when they're dead?
Yeah. I did get that feeling in one of the memorials that I went to. I was a little bit sad that that's what happens. That you don't, I wondered how much he got to hear all of this from his friends, from his,
I like
maybe
this.
Other people. It was so bad.
So famous mama says, no traditions for me, I believe, according to what that person wants. My husband died in 2020 of heart attack in his sleep. I got him cremated ASAP and scattered his ashes, and here I am. Business continues, she says.
Wow.
Since then, I've worked my ass off. I didn't waste my time mourning. I had to move on because I wanted change in my life, change so much for the better. Yes, I'm 32, single, and a mom to an amazing 11-year-old boy. The dating world is so dodgy. Well, I can't agree with you more than that. My R5's funeral was so bad that the kids on the street couldn't believe they were seeing what they were seeing in Mabopane.
Hey, I was shook. I was shook. all the things that I was just like, what is happening over there? Does this happen at all? Like, I wondered what is this guy's life about? Because I had never heard about him until the funeral pictures and all of that stuff that was on social media. I'm like, who is this guy and what was his life about if this is the way that everybody chooses to send him off?
You got to wonder, like, what kind of stuff did this guy get up to while he was alive if this is the way they say goodbye to him?
I did spend a little bit of time thinking maybe he ran a brothel.
It's possible. That's quite possible.
I was just like, what is all this scattered ass?
Vyasan says, I recently attended a funeral which was so short. This woman left strict instructions, no mourning, just partying. It was so different and refreshing. I went to one of those a long time ago. You know Kate Turkington, right?
Yes.
Her husband, Alan, died, must be 10 to 12 years ago now. And the grandchildren all made a little speech. There was no like sad, miserable stuff. They were all just gave a little, minute to two each. And there were drinks and music, and people just had a happy time. And I thought, well, he was Irish, so I thought,
so he had one of those Irish send-offs.
So I thought, well, this is nice. This is a fun way to do it.
Although I don't know if leaving strict instructions is the way to go. I think the people that are left behind must decide what they do. They must do what they need to do, like leaving instructions from the grave.
Well,
Suga, what a control freak you are.
I mean, legally, you have no rights after you die, so you actually don't have to be obeyed, and that's why wills and things are such a source of ire for people, because actually you're not allowed to rule from the grave, right? There's a strict injunction.
Like, what
in
kind
law.
Of control freak are you? Mm-hmm. My God.
All right. Well, all of this is happening. Dud says, hello, Pumi's made me leave the show back in the early days of the GCS. Nowadays, I love her and rate her as one of the best hosts. It's cool how we can change.
Oh, well, we love you too, Dads.
Thanks for admitting that, because you remember, Pums, there were people in the beginning who were like, oh, I don't like Pumi. I don't like her opinion on this. I don't like the way she does this or whatever. And now these people are your biggest defenders in the comment section.
I love the comment section. If you can't change your mind, how can you change anything else?
There we go. So I thought that was a nice comment. Okay, so looking at some other news. The University of Johannesburg has gone green with a new electric bus fleet. Yeah, is this really where a university should be showing off its ability to do things, or is this just virtue signaling? I don't know. You can decide. Maybe this is exactly what universities...
It's their own bus fleet. This is what universities should be doing.
Okay.
I think they should... Where else are they going to test their theories and their technology and advancements? Where do their students get to? Oh, actually, I do know this because I once spoke to a former professor of transportation from UJ, right? So all the people who are in the logistics department, right? Surely they should be able to test like efficient bus routes and what, the science students should be testing out, like emissions. I also saw a thing that the European Union has now signed their final declaration and zero emissions, carbon emission cars as of 2030.
Okay.
Nobody is allowed to, so all of that kind of stuff. Surely this is what universities should do. And how do university students get there? Not everyone has a car.
Well, the university said the new fleet has been well received by staff and students. Masiho Panyani, who is the UJ media specialist, said that the buses were the latest innovation in the university's effort to lead and embrace green energy and reduce carbon emissions in accordance with the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And they are very proud of this. And if you like that, then you can go and check it out. You could even catch a ride on one of these if you're going to the university campus. In a country plagued by load shedding and with the government declaring the energy crisis a national disaster, UJ COO Dr. Mpoti Ralepata said that students and the general public should not be concerned because there was a solution. He said 15% of the energy at UJ came from solar, which is enough to power the buses. We will have to have load shedding for more than 5 hours a night to affect the overnight charging.
Sure.
So that's very good.
And we do have load shedding for that long. We do have load shedding.
Well,
I went to bed. So I've been going to bed at 8 o'clock because I've been having that worst load shedding schedule, that 8 to 10:30.
Oh, no.
So I just go to bed. I'm just like,
well, a friend of mine posted a thing 2 days ago and said, I'm not being romantic. I've got candles because I've had load shedding for days. It's like, shame, poor her.
And this morning I had to get dressed in the dark. This morning again, so I went to bed in the dark.
Oh my God.
And when I woke up this morning, dressed in the dark.
It's infuriating. I hate it too.
I hate them.
I don't know anyone who's going around saying, I love me some load shedding.
I hate them.
Right. Anyway, all right. Other stories, because there's quite a lot to talk about this morning. Egg-stravagant theft. This is the headline. Egg-stravagant threat. We're not even at Easter yet, but this has to do with a man who was convicted of stealing nearly 200,000 chocolate eggs in London.
200,000. Yes. I have so many questions. Carry on.
So a man has been convicted of stealing 200,000 chocolate eggs worth around 40,000 pounds, which is a lot of money. And that is what British police have called an extravagant theft. Joby Poole, who's 32 years old, pleaded guilty in court on Tuesday to criminal damage and theft, West Mercia police said in a statement. Tens of thousands, of Cadbury cream eggs, a cult British chocolate egg with a white and yellow soft fondant center, was stolen from a unit in Stafford Park in Tetford, Western England, on Saturday.
Okay, so first off, how long does it take to move 10,000 chocolate eggs?
200,000.
200,000 chocolate
And you
eggs.
would need a refrigerated container, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
You put that in a normal truck, it's going to melt. Imagine you have 200,000 molten eggs is going to cause a river of chocolate.
And for what purpose? Do you think he was going to resell them?
Well, he was stopped by highway police on Saturday. He used a metal grinder to break into the industrial unit before driving off with the chocolate. This clearly wasn't.
This is an inside job. How does he know this container had these eggs?
I mean, it clearly wasn't a spur of the moment offending, if I could put it like that, because he had taken with him a tractor unit and he had to know that the load was there in the first place. Clearly an inside job.
It's an inside job.
He stopped the vehicle when he realized he was being followed, said his lawyer. He realized the game was up. He realized
jig was up.
The police were behind him and pulled in when it was safe to do so. He wasn't offering any resistance when he was arrested. Well, what are you going to say? Apparently, the extravagant theft took place on Saturday.
And he's already been convicted. Efficiency, hey?
Correct. Shortly after the theft of the vehicle, presumably purporting to be the Easter Bunny, he was stopped on the road. So I don't know what
was he dressed like the Easter Bunny?
No, but what was his long game? What was his plan? I mean, how are you going to make this work? Right? Jesus.
Oh,
what a dumbass.
Maybe if he'd stolen like a third,
well,
he would have been able to get away with it.
Sven says in the comments it's winter in Europe, so you wouldn't have needed a refrigeration unit, actually.
This is true.
I love chocolate to that extent that I could do this, says Cunning.
No.
Yes. Oh, yeah. I know people who love chocolate that much that they would steal. Oh, yeah.
I love chocolate, but I don't know if I love chocolate that much. I do love chocolate. It's like, and that's why Easter is one of my favorites.
So this is an interesting story. I want to hear your thoughts on this. Tesla chief executive Elon Musk. You ever heard of him?
In passing, yes.
Sometimes, yeah. He has just donated, listen to this, this is absolutely amazing, $1.95 billion worth of shares to charity. That's a fairly sizable donation, right?
Wow.
It's a bona fide gift. The filing did not name the recipient of the donation. On Wednesday, Mr. Musk said that towards the end of this year, would be a good time to find someone to succeed him as chief executive of Twitter. The document lodged with the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission showed that the donation was made between August and December last year. Tesla did not comment immediately. It is not the first time that Musk, who's estimated to have a net worth of $197.5 billion, has given Tesla stock to charity. He donated around $5.7 billion worth of shares in 2021. So he is ratcheting up his donations to charity. He also said on Twitter last year he planned to donate $20 million to schools in Cameron County and $10 million to the city of Brownsville in Texas for downtown revitalization. He has also hinted he plans to find his successor at Twitter by the end of 2023. So he's looking. If anyone wants that job, what a shit job. Would you want that job?
No.
Hell no, right?
No. But listen, gifting shares to a charity is a wonderful form of keeping the gift going, right?
Yeah.
Because then they get the dividends.
Correct.
They have the shares to put on their balance sheet.
Right.
It's a fantastic
Works
way
for
of
everybody.
keeping the organization kind of going for a long time. So that's a
and
that's
it's
a good
also
gift.
it's
That's
not
nice.
we're not talking small money here, like $2 billion. And Tesla's in the long run not going to be a disaster of a company, is it? As electric cars become more and more prevalent.
Absolutely.
Going to make more and more money. So I think that's amazing. Musk said he was working too much as he's juggling his responsibilities at Twitter, Tesla, and SpaceX. That's what he said.
I saw, and he tweeted something about SpaceX a couple of days ago.
Yeah, they're always busy with things.
But he is very, very busy, hey?
Well, I mean, this is the whole point, I think, is that people like him enjoy being busy. The last thing you want to do if you're Elon Musk is sit around and do nothing. I suppose that's true for many of us.
And you have to listen to all those thoughts in his head. Now he can just tweet them out and get all the engineers to make sure that it comes up at the top of the Twitter feed.
It does come up at the top of mine. I haven't been on Twitter a lot. I've got it on my laptop, not on my phone.
But
I've noticed that Elon does.
Well, over the weekend, he did convene a whole lot of engineers.
Did he?
But is the algorithm suppressing his tweets? There was a whole thing about this.
Well, this algorithm is a source of huge ire to people, right? And
I do hate this algorithm.
You do?
I do. I liked it when it was all like time-based, when it showed up because of the time that you're in, and instead of just pushing certain
but isn't there still a way
people and certain
isn't there a way you can override that stuff?
I have no idea.
I'm sure there is. Have you seen what happens when you try and override ChatGPT, by the way?
I did.
That's funny. That is hilarious. When you tell it to pretend it's something else.
This was the whole thing about Dan last week or the week before.
Right. Yeah. And it's fantastic to see.
It's, you know what it is? Have you watched Peripheral yet?
No.
Have I not told you about this show? You have to watch this show.
If you've told me, I've forgotten. So go ahead.
It is on, I don't know. It's one of the streaming services. I think it's on Amazon. And it sits in the near future, but and everything that we're kind of currently grappling with, whether it is AR, whether it is 3D printing, whether it is AI as well, has all kind of matured to its, and there is and it's all based on a video game. It starts out in a video game, so a fully immersive video game play.
Sure.
No, only and it veers off. It is an incredible series, and because it's so close to now, and as well as the fact that they've advanced all of the stuff that we're grappling with now, you know. So if you kind of think about the Oculus and how awesome it is to play in that space, and what you can do with 3D printing and what you can do with it, it's awesome. You have to watch it, and then we'll talk about it. But the ChatGPT, the AR, all of that stuff, Peripheral made me so excited about all of the things that the world could still become. But also at the same time, it's a little bit scary.
It's interesting here. George Meany from Auto Trader, he says, we banned the term algorithm at Auto Trader because people were just using it as an excuse for everything. Yeah. Peripheral is brilliant, he also says. Takes time travel to the next level. Well, I've often said that time travel is my idea of heaven. I mean, that would be the greatest thing. You know, often when people are messing around and they're like, what superpower would you want? We've played that game before on this show. If you could have any superpower, would it be to fly? Would it be to, to be able to read people's thoughts? Would it be able to shoot laser beams out of your eyes? To me, the greatest power would be to go backward and forward in time.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That's like superpower above all superpowers.
That is. And peripheral is a combination of all of those
and then
things.
I have to watch it. If you just said time travel like George did, I would have been on board. You wouldn't have had to do any of the other upselling.
Listen, it doesn't, I don't know when, and also it's quite irritating. So what these streaming services have done for me is they've absolutely broken my ability to watch periodical drama, right? So now I cannot just watch this episode for 45 minutes and wait a whole 7 days to watch the next episode. So I waited till the whole thing was out.
Can't be expected to do that.
I waited till the whole thing was out, but they still do it, like HBO and all of those guys, and they still get our attention. Look, when you're into it, you will wait. But I waited for the whole season to be out and then watched it all in one go. And now I can't wait for season 2. I hope they make a season 2.
So what do you think of our studio now that there's some soundproofing in here?
It's wonderful.
It sounds better, right?
It sounds so much better. It also smells like glue this morning.
It smells like glue. So if Phumi and I are high later on, then you know what's going on. Right? Yeah. No. We put this stuff on the walls, which is sound absorbing. And there's stuff on the ceiling as well, which is quite cool. We've now just got to decorate it a little bit. So this is the fun part. Now we can make it look pretty. Any ideas?
I just love the fact that the light. So today Ryan put me on the other side. I saw some of the content from last week's show.
You can hardly see you. Right.
But you can't see. And Ryan put me on the other side today, which is nice because I have a whole other view out there. But also the light is wonderful as well.
No, it's like, listen, it's coming together nicely. We're very excited. And there's so many people who we've invited in some of our clients and the people we've worked with for years. And we've had a couple of people around already come for coffee, come for some biscuits, come for, come and say hi. People are popping in. And very cool.
In case this little suggestion has since been thrown out the window by the creative team.
Yeah.
Lebang included. I'm just going to put it out here on the show so people can back me up on this. And we did have a whole thing about Easter eggs just now. I really think we need an Easter egg hunt here.
Oh no, this is the most perfect place for it. In fact, we were talking to the agency for one of the big chocolate companies just the other day, but we do an adult Easter egg hunt. Now, when you put the word adult in front of something,
I don't know what that means.
People immediately assume it involves strippers and nudity and like outrageous behavior. But all I mean is like it's an Easter egg hunt that adults can take part in as well. Right? So not just for the kids. And you have some clues which are like higher grade.
Yeah. Okay.
Not like 2 steps to the right at this, but you must make the clues a little bit more difficult.
The Easter egg hunt, guys. Easter's around the corner.
I think this will be fun.
This
perfect place to do it.
This should be done. I think, and if we did like web tickets, I think we'd probably get oversubscribed faster than AKA's.
Well, we're not, just for the record, we're not competing with anyone's memorial service. All right, I'll be clear about that. I haven't actually spoken to you about that. I mean, you've obviously seen, because everybody is sharing their theories now on Twitter. Obviously, rappers being shot is not novel in the world of rap music, but in South Africa, it kind of is. And this does look very suspicious. And yesterday, there were a whole lot of people speculating this Don, what's his name? Don Design or whatever his name is.
Oh, yes, Don Design.
That this guy is responsible. Now, obviously, I spoke to Lebang on Monday on the show. She was on with Dr. Hanan. She knew AKA quite well. And she was very, very distraught about the whole thing. But now I think it's probably appropriate for people to start asking questions about what actually happened, because this happened in public on a busy street. It was clearly premeditated by the hitman. It was a hit.
Yo.
And people, we got to call it what it is here. And there's no point in trying to disguise or skirt the truth here or anything else. People are going to have questions, and we can't just pretend, well, we're still in grief, we're still in shock, we're not allowed to talk about this. People are going to talk about it whether you and I like it or not.
So you guys know I was in the rurals last weekend, right? So and we actually eventually left on Saturday. We were going to leave on Friday, but we eventually left on Saturday. So on Saturday morning, when I woke up and looked at social media, all of the stuff was out there. But it happened because that happened in the middle of the night. Well, late on Friday night. And then I went away and I had no internet connectivity and didn't see anything until I drove back into Joburg on Monday afternoon. And I was astounded. So I'd never heard, this is not my world, the South African hip hop scene. No. So I'd never heard of Don Design. I do know Tibbs.
Yeah, Tibbs used to, I think you probably met him with us, because he used to do a show with Ari every afternoon for a long time.
So I do know Tibbs, and that was quite weird and shocking. And also Tibbs had been, as you know, he was one of the people that when the whole Me Too and all of that kind of stuff happened, he also fell off just in terms of social media and all of that kind of stuff. But I was horrified to see, is it Nota? Going apeshit. There is no other way.
Well, he recorded a video, and it was
multiple videos.
Yeah, it's just very upsetting.
Of him very just odd. Throwing around accusations, calling out people's names, saying all sorts of shit. And then there's also that guy with the very irritating voice. I'm back with another video. Have you seen the one who gets into, like, anyway, I don't know. He also has all sorts of gossip and stuff. And he also made a video going on about how AKA had been warned about going to Durban.
I saw that. So and was he banned from Durban?
By whom?
By who? Who's so?
What the fuck? We're all free. This is our country. We should be able to go where we want, when we want. And I mean, I was so mad at that little boy's video because he kept going on about, you gotta act right. If you've been warned, you should have stayed away from the. And I was just like,
who do you think you are?
You little twerp. The good thing.
Just careful, Phumi. They'll come and take a hit out on you.
I don't give a shit.
I could tell you're not scared.
But I just, and I thought, the two things that were overwhelming in my head, and I can't believe this is coming back in this show, is people should be allowed to grieve and mourn with dignity, right? All of these people and all of their like theories and the video out of the shooting and all the various angles and all of that, that's just vile. It's disgusting. Like, people shouldn't be exposed in that way. And then there's all sorts of the lawlessness with which we live. Why was this video allowed to be leaked? Slick Talk. Yes, that's the guy, Slick Talk. The theories, the people who are being named. I mean, Anele Tembe's father being dragged into this as being the number one suspect. For a long time, he was the number one suspect. It's just
very weird.
The fuck.
But also, I love all these armchair, like, criminal investigators. You can see that they've watched too much of those crime channels, and now they
listen to too many true live podcasts.
I mean, I've seen one of these videos. One was enough of, like, people with arrows. Here's the first hitman, and then they pause the video, and they're like, "Here's the second hitman. Why is he hanging around this car?" And like, these non-professionals are, like, suddenly looking for us to, I suppose, pay attention to them and give them some kind of credibility. Anyway, it's all very, very strange. I just thought interesting to watch people Because there's also a way people deal with things,
I
right? Some
think
people grieve, some people are in shock, some people are angry, and some people are trying to figure it all out.
I think the good news is I don't think that this is some kind of Biggie Smalls, Tupac,
No.
Suge
It
Knight.
wasn't a rap rivalry.
Hippie, hip hop.
West Coast, East Coast. Yeah.
These are not the hip hoppers we have.
No.
We don't have those guys. These guys, I mean, AKA went to St. John's for crying out loud. He is not like walking around strapped to a gun, and no matter what Nota says about who is who, this is not the kind of people we have in our hip hop game.
No.
Unfortunately, it really, really does look like an absolute hit with AKA. And unlike my armchair theory with Senzo Meyiwa, this was not a whatever gone wrong. This was deliberate. He was targeted, and Tibbs was collateral.
Imagine just being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Like, there's obviously, if this was a premeditated thing, which we have every reason to believe it wasn't just like random crime. But imagine being Tibbs. You're just in the wrong place at the wrong time. As you say, collateral. Imagine that. Because everyone's talking about AKA, no one's talking about Tibbs. And he died as well. And the worst part of that is, I suppose, that the attention that AKA and his family will get now is completely different to what Tibbs and his family will get. And actually, it wasn't about him from the beginning, so it's not about him at the end. It's just funny how that happens.
And also all of the stuff, with DJ Zintle, who's the baby mama,
right?
Nadia Nakai, all the ex-girlfriends, all of that. Again, it's all of the rituals and the expectations and the traditions and the it's
well,
it's a lot, huh?
SAPS are going to take years to investigate this case, says Stink Mina.
Have we not come to the conclusion and understanding of exactly how useless
the South African police are?
The police service is.
Yeah.
I know I saw a lot of people talking about Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi, who is the police commissioner, and I saw tweets about his credentials, and he even got a special mention from Julius Malema at the SONA debate. And
didn't Julius have a go at Becky Cele as well?
Yo.
Big time, right? We'll talk about that a little bit. We've got to get into that during the burning platform.
And it's just, and I do think, if anything though, the Twitterati, the Twitter PI, True Life Crime podcast crowd are definitely going to piece together more credible theories than we're ever going to hear out of the police service.
Probably. There's some motivation for those people who are armchair investigators. All of you, keep at it. You're probably going to come up with a better theory than the police. That's what Phumi says.
They are. Look at the Senzo Meyiwa. Senzo Meyiwa is my test case. Look at all of the theories that have come out of there. Look where we are. What did Defo call it? That situation. Yeah. And it still is. The same thing's going to happen with AKA.
Bastsana says that Tibbs' memorial's today. Kennan's is tomorrow for those who would like to attend. And then Ruth says there have been some excellent speeches and truth bombs in the SONA replies. South Africans are waking up, but I guess that's the next hour's discussion. Well, that brings us to the next hour, which we will begin in just a short while. I'm very, very happy that Greg Mills can join us from the Brent Hurst Foundation. Phumi went to the lunch last year and heard all about the scenario planning that's been going on, and also how they interpret what is happening around us already, where we could be going. And I think it's going to be great to spend some time with Greg Mills in the next hour. That's the Burning Platform. Coming up next, cliffcentral.com. It is Thursday morning. All the important information, all the current affairs info that you need on the way in the next hour.
Pop culture and time travel.
Exactly. We've gone from pop culture and time travel and finally decent coffee, I've got to add.
Yes.
Finally.
decent coffee. Thank you,
Right.
producer Ryan.
And we will also have a poll as usual. We've decided this is a good thing to do after last week's success with the poll. We're going to do that again today. We just got to come up with a question for the poll. That's next.
Do you want to replace your glass half empty mentality with a glass half full mindset? I'm Barrett Edelstein, and I present the Optimal Optimism podcast here on cliffcentral.com. Be empowered with practical tools around body, mind, food, exercise, and more to create a positive and abundant life. The Optimal Optimism podcast is made active by Virgin Active.
This week on the Auto Trader podcast,
we're going to Cape Town at the end of the month for eFest.
looking so forward to it.
Yes, for the 2023 Cape Town Grand Prix.
You are going to ditch Formula One after this.
I don't think I will.
Yeah, but I heard from the team that you have an unfair advantage. Catch us every Monday at 9 a.m. on YouTube and on Auto Trader.
All right, it is time for the burning platform on cliffcentral.com. This is your chance to catch up on all the things that are going on news-wise currently, all the things that people are talking about. And obviously, in the wake of the President's State of the Nation address, last week we had a poll that said, asked a very simple question. Are you even going to watch the President at the State of the Nation address? Phumi, did you watch it in the end?
No, I did not. I had to go to a memorial. That was way more important. It's also why I didn't come to I was gonna come to the launch.
Oh yeah,
I was gonna come to the book launch, but I ended up going to the memorial, all the way in the East Rand.
Okay, well, you weren't alone, because if you remember, the poll last week was, will you be watching the State of the Nation address? And most people said they would not. Now, the budget speech is happening. Enoch Godongwana, the Minister of Finance, will be tabling his budget speech. And someone said to me, well, people who want to know what's going on will be watching. But actually, all the people who want to know what's going on will get a copy beforehand.
Do you know what else?
And we'll have it summarized for them, right?
Do you know what else we haven't seen?
No.
A cabinet reshuffle?
We haven't. And that someone predicted that. Who was it? Canthan?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, he was wrong. He was wrong. So our poll this morning is, because we've been talking coalitions for such a long time now, which party do you think would be the best to lead a coalition going forward in cities, in provinces?
No.
You mean national
the
government?
yes, in national government,
All right.
who would be the best party to lead a coalition? And you've got 4 choices, people.
All right. So
go to YouTube.
We're going to put this on YouTube. You can follow it on the YouTube channel if you're watching us there live. And also, while you're on there, like and subscribe, please. It helps us, and it helps the algorithm to think that we're very important and they should pay us attention. And you should be paying attention, frankly, because we bring you guests the like of Greg Mills, who is with us this morning. Now, I'll tell you quickly, in summary, what Greg does, because it's actually fascinating stuff. Dr. Greg Mills heads up the Johannesburg-based Brent Hurst Foundation, which was established back in 2005 by the Oppenheimer family in order to strengthen African economic performance. He's been the director of studies and then the national director of the South African Institute of International Affairs from 1994 to 2005. He's also the author of multiple best-selling books, including Why Africa is Poor, Expensive Poverty, How South Africa Works, and his latest one, which is called Better Choices, Ensuring South Africa's Future. Phumi spent...
Which is a fascinating read.
It absolutely is. So I would only recommend Better Choices, Ensuring South Africa's Future. But Greg Mills is with us this morning, and Phumi spent a bit of time with him last year at a presentation from the Brent Hurst Foundation, which you said was so amazingly interesting that you needed to get him on the show. So I'm thrilled that he's with us this morning. Greg Mills, how are you?
Good morning. I'm fine, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Very busy man.
Yes, very nice to have you. I'm sorry it's taken us so long to find a date that worked for you, but we wanted to do this live, and I know how busy you are, so I'm glad that we've got you on today.
Yeah, that's great to be here. I was in Nigeria last week. I'm in Nigeria next week, so this is a nice break in the middle of the Nigerian sandwich.
Very good.
Well, Greg, I've got news for you. We here at the Burning Platform are now 3 for 3. We've had 3 different people come on. So if you run, you have a very good chance of becoming a mayor, because guess who just recently became a mayor, who was also on our show?
Who?
What do they call him? Souls the First. He has become, 2 days ago, he was elected as mayor in the Karoo.
I didn't, but we had a bit of an argument with him, as I recall.
We did. But all I'm saying to you, Greg, is if you're ready, the opportunity, when you come on this show, we had Dr. Mpho Phalatse, she became mayor. We had Dada Morero, he became mayor. And we had...
now Souls.
And he is mayor. So you can do it too.
I don't think you have any... You have no designs on political office yourself, do you, Greg?
No, the question is, how long did they last? You said they became mayor.
Well, that's a good question. Yeah, we can give you that initial jump, but we don't necessarily sustain it on the show. You have to keep coming.
Jump onto the Burning Platform. Yeah.
Now, tell us just quickly and tangentially before we get into the Brent Hurst Foundation and the reports that you've put out. Just tell us quickly about why you're in Nigeria. What are you looking at there?
So last week we ran 5 different round tables in 5 different countries, with sort of back-to-back round tables with security specialists and then presidential meetings under the auspices of our chairman, who's former President Obasanjo of Nigeria. So we started in Accra, went through Abidjan, Dakar, Niamey in Nigeria, and then in Niger, then ended up in Nigeria. And then this week I go back to be part of the Commonwealth Election Observer Mission, because the election's on the 25th of February, and that proves to be a very tight and somewhat divisive affair as ever in Nigerian politics, with 3 big contenders and 18 presidential nominees or candidates. And, you know, like all things in Nigeria, there's a huge amount of theater and drama and an enormous amount of money spent on it. So, you know, you're looking at elections where upwards of $3 billion have been spent in the past on election campaigns. So it's quite something, and probably quite divisive for the country, at least briefly.
Phumi has so many questions for you for this morning. I'm going to hand over to her so she can start the ball rolling.
It's not so many questions, but maybe, Greg, what you want to talk us through is the scenarios. You've called it the good, the bad, and the ugly. Do you want to tell us a little bit about your research and those scenarios?
Yeah, thank you, Phumi. I mean, so this came about last year as a result of several conversations with, among others, Rolf Meyer, who, of course, is a historic figure in South African politics. And like many South Africans, all of us are concerned about the direction. And we don't see politics as being something that's preordained, where you're simply a spectator in the process. We see, political processes and scenarios as something that point out to people that you're participants in a process, that you actually can shape your destiny. And scenarios are helpful in this regard because they essentially inform choices. And so what we did were two things. One is we developed a set of scenarios around some basic rules, and the basic rules were, you know, coalitions are, for example, are increasing likelihood in our politics, that there's no growth going to happen without investment. To get that, you need policy certainty and accountable government. That requires, of course, the rule of law, so security. You need a skilled public service, and you need foreign policy alignment to be able to open yourselves up to investment and trade. And then from that stemmed a number of big questions which we endeavored to answer. So what is, how will the politics play out? What are the likely scenarios? How will we attract investment? And of course, this largely depends on politics. How will jobs materialize? Can the state be able to shore up the security situation? Can we acquire the skills that are necessary to drive our economy, that we can use to instill our civil service? How can we undertake reforms? Can we get our finances in order? And then finally, can we acquire the power to be able to grow the steady stream of power that continues to blight our lives? And to inform this, we didn't just sort of, sit around the table as opinionated South Africans, as we all are, but we then commissioned a set of a survey. We did one in 2021, and we did one again last year. So we had some empirical basis on which to make these judgments. And these survey results were very interesting. They were very interesting. We added on questions about Ukraine, for instance, that, 3/4 of South Africans believe that supported Ukraine. They didn't support the Russians, which I think puts the South African government fairly squarely against its own people in this regard. But more importantly, we looked at people's attitudes as to why they thought that things had gone wrong and what they thought the solutions could be. So 80% of South Africans believe that coalition governments were a likely future outcome, that they welcomed them. And 80% of South Africans also believe that the ANC was responsible for much that had gone wrong in the last 30 years. And only less than 9% of South Africans believe that they will blame apartheid for the country's ills. And from this analytical backdrop, and there were many more questions asked, we then came up with 4 different scenarios: the good, the bad, and the ugly. And they're really about, and then there's a sort of 4th one, which is the fistful of sense, which is a sort of combination of these. And these really portray a South Africa which is either inclusive or one that remains extractive and elite based. And it's those choices that I pointed out that then inform these scenarios. And
So-
our current work is really just in writing them up into a short, digestible format for the public, which we're doing at the moment.
So talking about short, digestible formats, for those people who haven't had the benefit of seeing the report, and we can get into some of the detail in a minute, just sketch for us the good, the bad, and the ugly in the broadest terms possible, and we can maybe dive into some of the detail around that in some more of the time that ensues. But just in a very general sense, let's start with the ugly, because we like to be aware of how
bad things could
just
be.
how bad it could get. Because I hear people talking often about, well, we have to reach rock bottom before we can start fixing this country. But what does rock bottom look like, Greg?
And also,
Well-
we're not addicts.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've spent much of my career working in difficult environments. I spent a lot of time in Afghanistan, for instance, and other places.
Sure.
And there's one sad axiom in my line of work, and that is that the period of recovery is at least as long as the period of decline. So you don't really want to reach rock bottom, because it's just going to make the journey back up that much more difficult and that much longer. So,
All right, so
And
so
almost impossible.
So just quickly,
but-
sorry, Pums.
yeah,
On
sorry.
on that note, when do you think our decline really began? Because a lot of people are saying that most of the Mbeki era was a period of sustained growth. You know, there was a budget surplus, there was building of housing, there was provision of infrastructure. There was a lot that was going right under that period. Are you one of those people who buys into the 10 wasted years that we've heard bandied about so much, or do you think that the decline set in before or after that?
Well, I think some of the decisions made in the Mbeki government have led to the outcomes that we have today, for example, on power, and certainly set us up for not making some of the tougher decisions that we still have to make and have proven increasingly unable to do, particularly around labor and around education. So those difficult decisions were not done then and are now have been compounded later on. So it's not all sort of squeaky clean and shiny. But I would describe South Africa as being, a game of two halves. We had a pretty good first 15 years, and then a terrible second half. And it's been two halves of 15 years, roughly. And since 2008, since Mbeki left, we have really struggled, and it's been a continual downward slide, which Ramaphosa has been unable to arrest. We have all sorts of promises, regular fireside chats, promises of summits, and as you mentioned earlier, reshuffles, but none of it adds up to very much, because the very tough decisions are not being made. The very tough decisions about carving up the power utility, for example, into smaller entities, and getting rid of the kind of mafia state aspects to power provision. These are not being made because they fundamentally threaten political support within the ANC and the whole system that the ANC have constructed around it. So I think whatever the decisions were in the first half, they have led to a very bad second half. And we're kind of missing, to extend my football or rugby analogy, we're kind of missing a bomb squad to bring off the bench to be able to sort it out. We have promises that this is going to happen, but the bench is empty. And maybe the bench will come from somewhere else, but we've really run out of ideas. And that's why I think South Africans have turned to coalition governments, and that's why the ANC's support has dwindled, at least according to our poll, well below 50%. And that kind of leads me into the scenario. So the ugly one is that you have an ANC victory, but it is a scenario of really dwindling options. There's more government, but it's no more effective. You announce reforms, but they're not implemented. The tide of lawlessness continues, and it continues to rise. You only see low-level officials who are prosecuted for corruption. The kind of regional exodus continues. It's really where we are today, in many respects. So it's about an elite which is cosseted. It's about a political elite which continues to live off rent, but it's not about an inclusive South Africa that we hope for. And the bad really is a worse version of that. It's actually where ANC support is thrust below 50%, and it makes an alliance with the RET faction and the EFF. And then you have a rule by populists with very crude redistributive policies, potential nationalization of key businesses, and essentially what you'll see is the quiet whooshing noise of capital leaving, turning into a screaming jet turbine as the rule of law collapses, and divisions within the country sharpen as you see inequality rise. And I think most South Africans who think about these things can actually see that scenario, and we kind of look at it and go, "My goodness, that's not where we want to go. We want to get to the other side, which is the good, which is one where you have, I think, a multi-party coalition, and maybe if the ANC gets thrust below 50%, that you see a coalition emerge around the center, that instead of running this political economy, which is very much extractive, that depends on sort of tithes paid by politically connected individuals to maintain the party and its power, that you have a different system emerging around this sort of centrist coalition, and say maybe the ANC is at the center of this coalition, and it aligns itself. The ANC factions align themselves with others, and in this scenario, you will see reforms implemented. That you see private investments into logistics and into energy in particular, and we can't really see the country turning a corner without that. That you see the maintenance of sound fiscal controls and financial controls, which we have been able to do until now, and that's been really the saving grace of South Africa. And you see a more merit-based, skills-based civil service emerge, a BEE system that actually delivers to the poor, not just to the enriched at the top. A foreign policy that's more aligned to trade and investment and less aligned to hosting naval exercises with pariahs.
With Russia.
And then you get into educational transformation. And I think if we all sit back and look at the last 30 years, we would say the great failure has actually been, the great and chronic failure has actually been education, where we spend a fifth of our budget on education and get results which don't quite match that level of investment. And then I think finally the last scenario briefly is a fistful of sense, where you get a narrow ANC victory and a continuation of this rent seeking. So you have a sort of Brazilian type scenario of pockets of excellence which are retained and protected and isolated, and an increasing kind of sea of poverty and of inequality. And it's again not dissimilar to what we see at the moment, perhaps, but a bit starker in relief. But where you get this, increasing excellence in places like Cape Town, for instance, where you see municipalities thrive, but elsewhere you see most of them fail, as you do currently with only 41 of 257, I think is the last statistic, getting clean audits. You see this elite oligarchy continue, but with rising corruption. And essentially, it's a scenario where the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. And what scenarios do, Gareth and Phumi, is they essentially say, this is not preordained, as I mentioned earlier. This doesn't have to happen in this way. You're a participant in this. You have a voice in this. You can shape your own destiny. And that's what we're trying to empower South Africans to do.
So I think one of the things that comes to mind, and just bringing it back to what's happening today with SONA, right? Just listening to the various party officials get up there in what is essentially supposed to be a debate around what the president said, promised, reported on. And instead, what we see is a whole lot of buffoonery, right, coming back from them. We see them, none of them talking policy. I think the one person that I saw that kind of stuck to his principles, stuck to what he and his party are about is Peter Groenewald, right? He is
Vryheidsfront Plus.
Vryheidsfront Plus. He is unwavering about his constituency and what his constituency want to hear. But on the other side, almost everybody else, this is the opportunity to put forward what they stand for, what their policies are, how their solutions would be. This is the moment. This is their moment to shine, right? And none of them took that opportunity. Instead, we're listening to people and conspiracy theories about assassinations. We're listening to the bedroom antics of other political. I mean, it was just a mess. So even looking at a coalition and what it could be, I don't know if these guys instill that kind of confidence for us.
Well, I mean, one of the challenges we have in South Africa is the coalitions are very narrow, and as a result, they kind of piece together these patchwork components of parties that would not necessarily have much in common, except for the fact that they want to be in government and that they're perhaps against the ruling party. So they're very fractious, they're personality based, and easily divided. And I think that's what you've seen. With such tiny majorities, 1 seat here, 2 seats there, everybody wants to be king. Everybody wants to be the leader and have the prestige. But some of them don't have the support basis, so they're inclined to go off in a multitude of directions. Maybe a scenario where you have a greater majority and you can afford to lose 1 or 2 smaller parties out of that coalition. That's part of the maturing of South African politics. But But make no mistake, Phumi, it's never going to be pretty. It's never going to be easy. But the alternative is not so pretty and not so easy either.
No.
So the answer to improving our politics, which is the answer ultimately to improving our economics, is to create more competition, is to create more options. And I'm afraid that coalitions are the most likely way that that's going to be achieved.
But one of the things that the scenarios you talk about, the widening gap between rich and poor, and I'm just looking at some of the numbers that came out last year. Executives are earning record amounts. And one of the last numbers that I saw was the Woolworths executives, right? So the Woolworths CEO earning, jeez, in dollars as well, hundreds of millions. And all the rest of the frontline staff at Woolworths, I think altogether, including their bonuses, it was something like 50 million. That they all shared. So that widening gap between rich and poor. One of the things that you don't talk about is that it also creates ripe conditions for essentially anarchy, a revolution. July 2021 comes to mind. Is this something that you kind of talked about in your scenarios too?
Yeah, we do look at that. And I mean, the conditions of dearth and excess, I think, is the way we would describe it, that give rise to these frustrations, where you have these sort of pockets of extreme wealth and the Bentley Brigade or the Aston Martin Brigade living side by side with people knocking on your window at the traffic lights which don't work, is that scenario, and the frustrations that creates in the process. In that rising tide of helplessness, people in that true South African fashion make a plan, and it's not going to be it's not going to always be a legal plan, and I think you're going to see increasing illegality, as you see in alignment with that sort of declining powers in the state, particularly in the police force. So one of the consequences of it's not just a consequence of a failing economy, it's a and a failing system of inclusion and of job creation, but it's also a consequence of a failing system of law and order. And you've seen recently quite a dramatic spike in violence, in political murders, in murders, homicides more generally. And I think this reflects these conditions.
Now, just a quick question on that, because I was talking to somebody about the pitfalls of democracy and how it's not the most perfect system. But he said to me, well, actually, a democracy is a perfectly good system, provided that law and order component you've just spoken about, Greg, is intact, and provided people can see it working. Now, I don't know. Our justice system has covered itself in glory a couple of times. There have been a few times where it stood up to the executive. There have been a few individuals who've made tremendously brave decisions. And I think South Africans have become a little more dependent on that branch of government, the judiciary, than we might need to be. But their core competency is effectively making sure that people who are bad go to jail, and that people who are good are protected from the people who are bad, that there is a system that treats all South Africans equally. One of the big problems in this country is that legal representation has become outrageously expensive. So it's the province of the rich. And people are seeing very little justice applied to those who are quite obviously guilty just by a lifestyle audit or by virtue of the way they conduct themselves publicly. It's not as if they're hiding the ball. Do you think that that's demoralized people too?
I don't know. That's a great question. And certainly something that we would stick in another survey, which we intend to do later this year. I do think it, instinctively, that it has a consequence. We were in, as I said, West Africa last week, and what we heard time and time again, because there's a big third-term debate around many countries, not least in Senegal, which is a relative regional success, and a lot of people were saying, the lack of sort of political responsibility, accountability goes into issues like third terms, but it is also around people going to jail. And the big difference was always cited back to us was Israel, for example, where prime ministers end up in jail. I think 2 have been to jail recently. South Korea, where presidents go to jail. Peru, where I think of the last 6 presidents, I think 5 are either on charges or in jail on corruption charges. So, and then South Korea, where famously the president is also on jail. So in jail. So you have to have, this system which makes people fundamentally accountable. And I think what we've had in South Africa is not only have we had a lack of political accountability at the top in that regard, and some treatment of Parliament as the theatre that Phumi has described. So one of the dangers in what's happened in our Parliament is it just becomes a spectacle, and the business of Parliament is sort of relegated to almost like a sideshow. That's another.
I think you can see that if you look at the number of laws that have actually been promulgated in the last couple of parliaments. It's been outrageously. I mean, it's just we're paying for these people to go essentially and either sleep or perform like actors rather than actually pass laws.
Yeah, so you need systems of accountability, and the way that happens, it's not for politicians to make themselves accountable. It's for the electorate to make politicians accountable. So the only time that happens is every 5 years, where we get an opportunity to pull the lever in one direction or another, and that's ultimately the sanction that we have on politicians in a democracy. So we shouldn't complain if they get away with it, because we are essentially letting them get away with it.
But I think in South Africa, there is also, it doesn't have to be that every 5 years where we get to pull the lever. I think one of the things that has also happened in South Africa is we're all guilty of being complicit, in that we're all rather wait the 5 years rather than stand up and be part of the individuals who make up that body politic, or become those principled and skilled public servants. We'd much rather just kind of complain behind our high walls, if we have high walls. But which then makes me want to ask this question. You talk about scenarios being information to allow us as South Africans to make certain decisions. So I ask myself, what should I be doing right now, looking at these scenarios? Should I be, sticking it out, or should I be saving all of my money to buy a pondoiki in New York?
You'd have to save for a very long time to buy your pondoiki in New York, but a cupboard maybe. I think one of the challenges, you did right, Phumi. I mean, I think one of the challenges is that we are in South Africa not only masters of our own destiny, because we are, but we're also prisoners of our past. We have successfully kind of made identity politics because of our history, and because of the nature of our politics since 1994. We've made that the defining feature of our political choices. That's changing, and I think will change over time. Maybe the next 15 years will be about more issue-based politics, because I think what we have learnt, if nothing else, is that identity politics has kind of run its course in terms of pulling South Africa in the right direction. And I think if we continue to make decisions based around identity, principally around race, then we're in for a very torrid time, because essentially we're letting government off the hook, because we say, well, hang on a second, it's the government that represents us because of what they look like rather than what they do.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree with that more. In fact, it's the cause of quite a few of the arguments I have with people who pretend to be politically astute, but are actually just race hustlers.
But also, I think around the issue of issues in terms of how we make our decisions. One of the things that I was also particularly interested in when I looked at your scenarios is you didn't just you were navel gazing, right? It wasn't just looking at South Africa. It was also looking at geopolitics. So looking at Africa and looking at the world. Are South Africans interested? I think about parties that are growing, like Action SA, whom the only kind of utterances you hear from them about anything other than South Africans is what South Africans should do to foreigners.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, when you're under stress at home, you tend to look at reasons for your misery or for your ill fortune, and you turn to people who are different to you. And this is, I think, an outcome, by the way, of identity politics. I'm poor because there's Zimbabweans here. I'm poor because there's Mozambicans or Malawians here,
Yeah.
or Somalis, and then you end up with xenophobia. And the fact that our politicians are not quick in on this and to discourage it is I think well it runs against the spirit of South Africa's own transition and our own history, among other things, and it's very much against the kind of Ubuntu premise that this government and many South Africans would hold. So
But
that on the one hand, but I on your question as to are South Africans following the world outside, I think probably not. But that's also in part because our relationships with the world outside have also become part of this theater. We don't think of foreign relations in terms of opportunity. We think of them in terms of threat. We don't think of outsiders coming in terms of skills and the capital that they might bring. We think of what they're taking away, the jobs or the profits that they might earn. And that is about political direction too. It's about leadership that informs that public debate. So we tend to see the world in zero-sum terms. We don't see it as a growing pie. We see it as a static pie in which we have a certain slice, whether that be at home or abroad. And I think that's a feature of political leadership, because we're not open to trade. We're not open to the rest of the world. We see the world in academic terms, in very mercantilist terms.
Yeah.
So we have to bear our shoulder our share of the responsibility as to why South Africans think like that, because we see a world of threat and a world of theater, not a world of opportunity and trade.
Well, let's turn our attention to the outside world for a moment, because you did mention the Russia-Ukraine situation, and you referred very sort of disparagingly, and I think fairly, to the South Africa and Russia situation. Obviously, Sergei Lavrov, the minister, the Russian foreign minister, visited us the other day, was very warmly received. Janet Yellen was probably as warmly received. We can't keep playing this game where we're friends with everybody, because you have to make decisions in international relations. You have to have allies and you have to have enemies. And unfortunately, even if our politicians think glad handing and smiling and waving is an appropriate response, international diplomats and the people who operate at the highest levels internationally won't tolerate that for long enough. They'll start thinking of you as a dishonest player if you don't choose a side. And it seems like South Africa's tiptoeing around, trying to be best friends with Russia, which we are by virtue of the fact that we've had years and years of very good relations with Russia. Don't know how well it's benefited us, but that's another discussion. And then the sort of snubbing of our Western allies, Europe, the USA, to the obvious to the benefit of Russia and China and those sorts of people, those sorts of countries. Now, what does that mean, Greg, long term? There doesn't seem to be a strategy for international relations.
Yeah, strategy is not a term I would bandy about with this government, to be honest, and whether it be international relations or anything else for that matter. Strategy is when you have a set of objectives and then you put resources and a timeline to it, and then you get a plan and a direction. And we don't do that. We announce objectives. We'll tend to have a big event around them, and then we don't really have a strategy and a plan to achieve that. So two things really. I mean, I think that South Africa's international relations, and particularly its relations with Russia, are as perplexing as they are predictable. It's predictable because we've always seen international affairs as a place that we could be radical. Even if we were conservative in our economic policies at home, we could have a radical tinge to our government by having good relations with Cuba trying to cock a snook at any opportunity with the United States. But it's clear that in the case of Ukraine, this has taken on a different dimension because we're not really non-aligned at all. By cozying up to the unlovable Lavrov, we have essentially sort of pinned our colors to the mast of these authoritarian states around the world. Now, this is contrary to our values. This is contrary to the values that founded the modern South Africa, and it's contrary to the values, the real inner stuffings that make states successful. When people talk about success, they often tend to ascribe success to things like, smart infrastructure and what they call in the trade performance legitimacy. So you're doing well, all the indicators are great, the infrastructure works, so therefore you're successful. But actually, success is much more than about the things on the surface, as Russia teaches us. It's actually about the things beneath the surface. It's about values, trust, accountability, the inner stuffings, the soft power that makes countries successful. And we have essentially sold this. I think it was Malema who said we sold our country to the Guptas for a plate of curry, very disparagingly and very sort of racist terms on the part of Malema. But I think in the case of Russia, we have sold our country for not even a bottle of vodka. I mean, we've essentially we've sold it in order to be able to appear radical, in order to be able to appear an ally of those who are against something else. And we've essentially undermined, last point, we've essentially undermined fundamental precepts of international law around sovereignty, around the right of states to determine their own fortunes, and so on, and opened ourselves up to a world of pain in Africa in the process. Because if other African countries had to follow this path, we would find it very hard to criticize them as a consequence of this.
Unfortunately, I think that the South African government is a little bit of a prisoner of non-thinking, because
in other words, they're stupid. If you're a prisoner of non-thinking, I mean, there's a simpler term for that, right?
Gareth. But I think there was a time where South Africa had the moral ground to be able to be in the middle, to be able to pull together differing sides. I think about the work that they did in Ireland. I think about the work that was done in
we used to have moral capital.
And I think even in this instance with Russia and America, I think with a little bit of savvy politicking, with a little bit of strategy and thinking, there was a time when what could have been done is for South Africa to play a role that is a conciliatory role for all of it. Because the last thing that we want, and everybody, China's beating the drums of war. Russia has already made it very clear where they are in terms of war. What everybody, looking at the economics worldwide, the inflation worldwide, the last thing the entire world needs is another world war. And that's where we're edging.
But we don't have any moral or intellectual capital to spend anymore, or goodwill.
Absolutely.
It was fine when we had Nelson Mandela and we were the Rainbow Nation and we had a great story to tell and all of those things. But what have we got?
But what the guys have squandered.
We're a pisher now. I mean, people laugh at us because our ministers of foreign affairs in one breath are told that they can't say anything positive about the Ukraine, and then in the next breath are welcoming the Russian foreign minister, and God alone knows what they even believe.
I think there's a bigger concern here. I mean, firstly, Phumi, I think Gareth is right on our good officers to negotiate anything. I've been in Ukraine 6 times over the last year since the war broke out, and for the Ukrainians to negotiate chunks of their territory away in the cause of peace isn't going to happen, because Zelensky will never survive that. They might have a ceasefire around current lines, but they're never going to have a peace agreement around current lines. So, I mean, it's a bit like us giving away, parts of the Free State to Lesotho if they happen to invade us. We're not going to do that. So why should we expect the Ukrainians to do that? So our view of reconciliation, of negotiation, when it comes to this is I think a million miles away from the reality on the ground. The second point is I think that there are real concerns that this is not just about South Africa losing its kind of moral compass in terms of understanding of international relations and our set of values, but do the Russians actually have something on us? Do the Russians
No.
have we simply sold our country for the business interests of a few
Nuclear
connected
power,
politicians?
perhaps?
Whether it be
Nuclear power,
nuclear
perhaps?
power or whether
Mm.
it be gas, much more likely, and gas provisions into South Africa as part of an ESCOM solution, or whether it be, the Lady R arms deals, or whether it be Russian oligarchs funding the ANC directly, or oil deals or money laundering. All sorts of possibilities arise, and until we know the answer, I'm afraid and until the government actually tells us what happened with the Lady R, for instance, we're never going to. We have to think otherwise. We have to think the worst.
Greg,
So
so
I don't believe that it's entirely us losing our way. I think we probably have found our way, and the way just doesn't look very nice.
So speaking of losing ways, because I do want us to talk about the poll. There've been quite a number of interesting things happening there with the poll, but also then looking at all of these various things. And I'm gonna put you on the spot, Greg, to say, for you, in order for us to get to best case scenario with these scenarios, what are the things that need to happen now so that the best case scenario can come to pass?
Sure. Well, we need to see a cabinet reshuffle. I know you discussed this. Hopefully,
It's not gonna happen, guys.
hopefully after the election, after the budget speech, sorry, which is more in line with delivery than internal ANC politicking and placements. And then you need to see some real action taking place on Eskom. And real action on Eskom, I think, has to be increasing involvement of the private sector and the unbundling of the utility. But as a first step, it has to be actually not just announcing PPPs, but actually getting these deals to happen, to start feeding power into the grid, to allow municipalities to do their own thing, to concession our ports, to at least concession part of our ports, Cape Town and Durban.
Yeah.
And Quebec, notably. These are real things that can actually happen. They can change the image of government, but we do talk about them an awful lot. And until now, the Minister of Coal, Mr. Montashe, has really blocked all efforts to green our economy, to open up the power sector, because the power sector is a kind of source of much of the patronage that exists within the country at the moment. So what we're going to see, if that's to happen, we're going to have to see a fundamental restructuring within the power corridors of the ANC, and that's going to be very interesting to watch. It's not difficult to do. I don't believe it's as difficult to do as it probably is politically tricky for the president to carry out, because he's going to have to use his political capital. And what we have learned over the past 6 or so years is that this is a president very cautious and very reluctant to use his mandate. And I know we live in hope, but I wouldn't hold my breath.
But okay, so I want to ask you two things. I want to ask you about the bomb squad, but I do want to make a point around kind of the unbundling and privatizing of services in particular. I was telling Gareth earlier that I was out in the rurals over the weekend and had no connectivity in that part of the country, because it doesn't make economic sense for a Vodacom to have a tower there. All of those people are left out of the economy because they don't see how this 3,000 people are going to pay for their service. We can't, as a country with so much of a gap between what people can afford and what people who can afford and people who can't afford, hope that the benevolence of capital will provide services for everyone. So, I mean, I think we need to have a different
Would you rather rely
conversation
on government? I mean, there are only two options.
I think we need to. That's the thing. right? I don't think we only have two options. I think we need brighter minds thinking about what various components we can put together, because we're not going to be able to pull out people from poverty. We're not going to be able to create an inclusive economy if we're going to hope for the benevolence of people who are making money. We were just talking about how much money the executives make, and how much money the people who don't. But I do want to talk about your bomb squad. I would like to know what that bomb squad cabinet would look like if ever we saw a reshuffle, which I don't believe we're going to see.
I'm amazed you survived a weekend without social media. You probably have to go into therapy after that. Certainly, my children would need to. But the I think I'm not a sort of a person who's a fundamentalist private sector proponent. I mean, of course, there's a role for the state, but you also have to recognize where the state has failed, and that its promises are increasingly hollow. So what we learnt out of the COVID vaccination drama is that until you inspan the private sector, you basically, just talking nonsense, and you don't have the capabilities to be able to run a system of that scale across the country without private sector involvement. As soon as the private sector became front and center of the vaccination rollout, then the whole thing happened almost instantaneously. I mean, South Africa was a model case, but until that point, it was lagging, getting compared to even its African contemporaries. I, in fact, got vaccinated before everybody else in Somaliland, a country which is not recognized.
Wow.
Because they had vaccines available well before South Africa, before we had actually made the decision to go private. But yes, there's a role for the state. There's a role for a more efficient state. There's a role for a state that's accountable and that doesn't see lots of money squandered. I know that sounds like a tall order, but yes, there is undoubtedly a role for them. What would a bomb squad look like? A bomb squad would be people who are appointed more on merit and less on their political favorability rating.
Do we, Greg? A serious question on that. Do we even have people of merit left in the ANC? Because everybody keeps telling me that they're there, but the brains trust of the ANC always was the South African Communist Party, and that's a complete disaster and a joke if I've ever seen one. Who are the smart people that are left? I mean, people harken back to the days of, Trevor Manuel and Tito Mboweni and those sorts of people, but they're gone. They're out
Listen,
now.
We cannot talk about Trevor Manuel. Trevor Manuel and his policies are what has led us to the most unequal society in the world.
But this is obsession with equality. How do you think incentives work, Phumi? You think people are going to go around doing social good?
You cannot live in a country where we have a 1-to-1 ratio, where 30 million people in our country live on less than 20 Rand a day.
I'm not saying it's great,
is why
but you are living.
That is why it is a recipe for a revolution.
But
this is why we are in this position where we are so scared.
It is demonstrably true that you can, because you are. So that is a fact, whether you like it or not. Whether it's fair or not is a whole different discussion. But incentives in this respect are the things we must discuss. Do you think people are just going to suddenly up and help each other and put things in place? There needs to be a good incentive. And I think that partly that comes from getting the right people into power. And Greg's saying merit. I'm asking who are these people who have the merit to lead us? And second of all, getting the private sector involved, which we seem to be able to do better than almost any other country when we do it. And I'm not saying that they're guiltless or blameless.
I know it's never going to happen because it's just highly unlikely in the current political circumstances. But if Ramaphosa was really the political genius that he's sometimes held out to be, that what he would do was he'd reach across the political aisle and bring in other people from other parties who have those capacities,
or even civil society.
And civil society. This is a great moment to do that because South Africa is, by his own admission, in a state of disaster, and we don't really see a way out of this. So the answer is I think, in politics, and I think the answer is in politics outside of the ANC. And that's, is it too difficult to do that? If what is at stake is South Africa, is it too difficult to sacrifice the facade, the illusion of ANC or alliance unity to the greater good, which is
I think everyone
South
can see
Africa.
through it already.
I think
We can see.
that's the question. So, Phumi, your bomb squad, I think, would involve people from outside government. It would involve some other people from within the ANC. But if we simply reshuffle, I know, to use that old analogy, it's deck chairs on the Titanic time, and
So
we're searching out icebergs.
Cyril Ramaphosa has tried very hard. I think he has demonstrated to all of us that he is wanting to be inclusive and bring people from outside politics. That's why we have are we at 28 different commissions now, between
And an
the
extra
chief
and a new
ribbon
ministry
cutter
as well.
and now a new ministry. So he has said to us that this is what he's doing, and all he's really done is he's consolidated power into the presidency. He's created all of these superstructures that are outside of cabinet, and therefore we the people don't really have any way of holding any of them accountable. They're not elected officials. We don't even know what they're doing. We don't even know what they're doing, as he has all of these summits and he raises all of this money. There is absolutely nobody that knows what Cyril Ramaphosa is up to, and he keeps doing it.
It doesn't seem to be working terribly well, whatever he's up to. And they are accountable
For us. It's not working for us.
They're accountable every 5 years. And the mini squabble that you and Gareth had there a moment ago reminds one that, that yes, there are 28.3 million South Africans on welfare. There's basically 14 million South Africans who work, of which about 3 million are in the civil service. It's unsustainable. You can't run a country on that basis, where you've got a workforce of the best part of 40 million people, and so many people are essentially outside of it. So we have to do something different. We have to strike off in a different direction. Otherwise, we're going to sort of prove all the naysayers, the nattering nabobs of negativism, as it was famously put by Richard Nixon. We're going to prove all of them true. And that's not what we are capable of doing. We can do something different in South Africa. And to return to where we started, our scenarios point that out. There are actually different alternatives, and South Africa can easily follow those. And South African citizens have the power individually to determine that.
Thank you very much, Greg. It's been great to have you on the show. And there are lots and lots of questions we didn't get to, but I encourage anybody who is interested to read the report, the Brent Hurst Foundation report. And I hope we'll get to catch up with you.
They can download it from your website, right, Greg?
Of course they can, yeah. And there'll be a longer version out shortly, and we'd be delighted to share that with people too.
Fantastic.
Awesome. And thank you for being on the show this morning. It's good to have you here. Thank you, Greg.
Paul Rizal.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So, Phumi, we don't squabble. We argue properly. Really. By the way, there are a lot of people sending in messages that Trevor Manuel, we want to unpack why you think his policies led to inequality, as opposed to the growth and the incredible economic strength of South Africa in the early 2000s.
Trevor Manuel came to be our Minister of Finance and was one of the world's longest serving ministers of finance at the same time. And he has no background in finance. He has no background in economics. At the same time as what they had in America. When I say Robert Rubin, right, with Clinton. And in the same amount of time that Clinton and his finance minister, who came from an economics background, and I think Goldman Sachs at the time, and what Trevor Manuel had here. In America, they were able to bring millions of people out of poverty. And here in South Africa, we plunged millions of people into poverty.
Were they not poor before?
But this is my point, right? Is there were people.
So you're saying we took rich people and made them poor?
We took rich people and made them poor. Just now, even as we talk about the dwindling, so even as we talk about the number of people who are currently employed versus the number of people we have in this country, if we look at the number of people who are on welfare in this country versus the number of people, you know what I'm saying?
All we've done is provide more welfare.
But what we have done is there is no way with a 350 Rand grant,
there are less people employed.
There are less people employed. So we have had a population explosion, but the policies in place have not allowed us to grow our economy. The policies we have in place have not allowed us to see people get off the welfare system. In fact, what we have seen is more people get on the welfare system. That is a problem. That is a problem. The fact that they are on welfare is a great safety net, but the welfare that we have is insufficient. The reason why we keep talking about the fact that we are teetering on the brink of some kind of revolution in this country.
The only way you fix that is by creating jobs. And the only way you create jobs is to actually have a thriving economy that's growing, which is what Trevor Manuel and Thabo Mbeki gave us. The only way you create
jobs is by having policies in place that allow for business.
Policies don't make jobs.
Policies don't make jobs, and neither do politicians. But what policies do is they create a grounding on which to create viable, sustainable businesses. If we live in a country where we have economic policies that do not allow people to be able to participate,
like BEE.
amongst others, where we have such onerous rules,
labor regulations,
in order to be able to get into business, where we get small businesses so bogged down by paperwork rather than doing work. Those are all policy decisions.
Yeah.
Those are all policy decisions. Where we have an overtaxation of small business, all of those things are policy decisions.
Absolutely.
And the
We're on the same
policies
side on
are
this one.
incorrect.
We do have to. You and I, we want to get into this, and we will.
We should.
No, we should. And I think it would be worth almost having someone who'd analyzed the economy over the last 27, 30 years.
Dori and I have been trying.
Yeah. If there's anyone, by the way, if anyone in the audience can think of who that person might be, who the best person to speak to here, it could be in respect of kind of analyzing South Africa's economic decline. I'd love to know who that person is. You can suggest your people to us in the comments. Also, like and subscribe. And the poll results. Dun, 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 dun. So we asked the question, which party would be best to lead a coalition government? And the results are, you especially said don't put the ANC in there.
Yes.
Why? Why did you say that?
Well, because we are in this mess because of ANC policy. So and remember, what you want to do with the poll is you want to create an opportunity to think laterally. We want to think differently. We are clear, guys, that the thinking that has got us here is not going to be the thinking that is going to get us out of here.
So the results are 1% EFF. At least there's 1% for them, right? 6% is the IFP. 11% Action SA, and kind of unsurprisingly, the DA comes in at 82%. So those are, without comment from Phumi and I this morning, because we don't have time, those are the poll results. We will see you next Thursday for more.
Squabbling.
No, but I love that. Jesus, if you and I sat here and agreed every week, this would be the most boring show in the world. All right, and if you've got suggestions, let us know who. Someone's already suggested Mike Schussler, Davi Rutt. We'll see if we can get some of those people in. Excellent stuff. Thanks, everybody.